Some of the most valuable coins can be hiding in the last place you would expect, inside an old change jar, forgotten drawer, or even mixed with the quarters you use every day. And here is what makes this hunt so exciting. A coin does not always need to look beautiful to deserve a closer look. Welcome back to Mint Vault USA, where we uncover rare coins, valuable errors, and hidden treasures that collectors are searching for. Today, we are examining 4 Washington quarters that may look ordinary, dark, dirty, worn, or even damaged at first glance. But certain minting errors, unusual varieties, and rare characteristics can completely change the story. So before you spend another old quarter, grab your coins, turn on a bright light, and keep your magnifying glass nearby. Because one tiny detail could be the reason a collector takes a second look. And make sure you stay with me until the final coin, because that is where the biggest surprise is waiting. Now let's start with the first coin. This first coin may look like the kind of quarter most people would spend without a second thought, especially when it is heavily circulated, dark, and covered with years of dirt. But a 1984 Washington quarter deserves a closer look before you drop it into a vending machine or toss it back into a change jar. The dark surface itself does not make the coin rare, but certain hidden minting characteristics can make the right example far more interesting to collectors. That is why you should never judge an old quarter only by its bulk. Sometimes, the important clue is small enough to remain unnoticed for decades. The story of this quarter takes us back to 1984, when Washington quarters were everywhere in American daily life. People used them in parking meters, pay phones, arcade machines, laundromats, and vending machines, so these coins were constantly moving from one pocket to another. The 1984 quarter was produced in large numbers to meet that everyday demand, and the example we are examining carries the D Mint mark, showing that it came from the Denver Mint. Because these quarters were made to circulate rather than sit inside collections, many surviving examples today show scratches, worn details, dark surfaces, and other signs of a long life in circulation. Take a close look at the front of the coin, and you will see the familiar portrait of George Washington. The word liberty appears above him. In God We Trust is placed beside the portrait, and the date 1984 appears near the bottom. The small D Mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. On the reverse, the classic eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows, with olive branches below. United States of America appears around the upper portion, while EPLURBUS UNUM and quarter dollar complete the design. It is a familiar appearance, which is exactly why unusual examples can be so easy to overlook. The 1984 Washington quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin rather than one of the older silver Washington quarters. Its outer layers contain copper and nickel, while the center is copper. On many normal examples, you can see a cup-colored band along the edge. This is an important detail for beginners because a quarter that turns black, gray, brown, or another unusual shade has not necessarily become valuable. Environmental exposure, moisture, chemicals, dirt, and decades of handling can change the appearance of a coin dramatically without creating rarity. Now imagine finding one of these quarters in heavily circulated black and dirty condition. Washington's hair has lost much of its sharp detail, the high points of the portrait are smooth, and the reverse eagle looks worn from years of use. Dirt may be sitting around the letters and close to the rim, while dark tunning covers much of the surface. Most people would see an unattractive old quarter and move on, but a collector knows that condition and rarity are two different things. A worn coin can still deserve attention if it contains a genuine mint-made feature that survived beneath all those years of circulation. This is where careful inspection becomes important. Start with the date and the D Mint mark, then slowly examine the lettering around Washington's portrait. Look at Liberty, In God We Trust, and the numbers in 1984 under good lighting and magnification. You are not simply searching for scratches or strange shapes. You are trying to determine whether anything unusual was created during the minting process. Damage that happened after the quarter entered circulation is very different from an error that happened while the coin was being produced. One feature that often gets collectors excited is apparent doubling. If parts of the date or lettering seem doubled, do not immediately assume you have found a valuable double die variety. Ordinary wear, machine doubling, scratches, and other forms of damage can sometimes create a doubled appearance. A genuine double die has specific characteristics that experienced collectors and professional graders can identify. If the doubling appears strong, consistent, and connected to the original design rather than random surface damage, the coin may deserve further examination. The reverse deserves just as much attention. Study the eagle's wings, the arrows, the olive branches, and the lettering around the design. Look for areas that appear unusually weak, shifted, missing, or distorted, but remember that heavy circulation can remove fine details over time. A worn feather is not automatically an error, and a damaged letter is not automatically a rare variety. The important question is whether the unusual feature was created at the mint or happened later during the coin's long journey through circulation. Another dramatic possibility would be an off-center strike. This happens when the blank coin is not correctly positioned during the striking process, causing the design to appear shifted away from its normal location. Genuine off-center errors can attract strong collector attention, especially when the mistake is visually dramatic and enough identifying detail remains on the coin. However, a quarter that has been bent, crushed, cut, scraped, or damaged after leaving the mint is something completely different. The difference may look small to a beginner, but it can make an enormous difference to a serious collector. You should also examine the edge of the quarter carefully. A normal 1984D clad quarter should show the expected construction, but an unusual edge, weight, thickness, or metal appearance can sometimes give collectors a reason to investigate further. Never cut the coin, scrape the edge, or use chemicals to test it at home. If something genuinely seems wrong with the physical characteristics, preserving the coin exactly as you found it gives an expert the best chance of determining what happened. Condition also plays a major role in the Washington quarter market. A heavily circulated coin has been handled and spent for years, so much of its original surface may be gone. An uncirculated example can retain stronger details and original mint luster, while coins at extremely high certified grades can become much harder to find. This is why two quarters carrying exactly the same year and mint mark can receive very different levels of collector attention. However, because the coin we are discussing is heavily circulated, its big money potential would need to come from something truly exceptional rather than simply from normal condition rarity. This is also where online coin hunting can become confusing. You may see ordinary-looking quarters offered online with enormous asking prices, sometimes enough to make anyone run toward their change jar. But an asking price is not proof that a coin has that value. Anyone can place an ambitious price on a listing. Serious collectors want evidence, including correct identification, professional authentication when needed, rarity, condition, and actual market demand. That is why the unusual feature on the coin matters far more than a dramatic number attached to an online advertisement. Now picture yourself holding this dark 1984D quarter under a bright lamp. At first, it looks completely ordinary. You rotate it slowly, watching the light move across Washington's portrait and then across the eagle on the reverse. Suddenly, something catches your attention near the lettering or strike. You look again with magnification, and the feature still appears unusual. This is the moment when patience matters. Instead of immediately deciding that you have found a fortune, you compare the coin with normal examples and determine whether the difference could have happened during minting. If the feature appears significant, stop handling the coin more than necessary. Do not try to make that black surface shiny again. Cleaning an old quarter with metal polish, baking soda, chemicals, brushes, or abrasive cloth can leave permanent marks. Even gentle-looking cleaning can change the original surface in ways experienced collectors recognize quickly. That dark appearance may not add rarity, but removing it improperly can make the coin less desirable and can destroy important evidence around an unusual feature. Now we reach the part that makes people check every quarter in the house. Could a 1984D Washington quarter ever become a serious big money discovery? An ordinary, heavily circulated example does not become a six-figure treasure simply because it is black or dirty. For a coin like this to enter an extraordinary value category, it would need something extraordinary to match, such as a spectacular authenticated mint error, an extremely important discovery, or a combination of characteristics rare enough to create intense competition among advanced collectors. In an exceptional hypothetical situation, imagine that a heavily circulated 1984 D quarter was professionally confirmed with a dramatic, previously unknown, nearly unique minting error. If the discovery were important enough, and several major collectors wanted the same coin, a headline-making valuation could theoretically climb toward an astonishing $185,000. That number should not be treated as the normal market value of a 1984 D quarter. It represents the kind of extreme dream scenario that would require an extraordinary authenticated discovery, not dirt, ordinary damage, or common circulation wear. And that distinction is what makes searching old coins so fascinating. The quarter itself can look terrible while the important feature remains hidden in plain sight. Imagine somebody receiving this coin as change years ago, seeing its dark surface, and dropping it into a jar without looking at it again. The jar gets moved into a closet, then into a garage, and eventually forgotten. Decades later, someone pours those coins onto a table and notices the date. They see 1984, find the small D mint mark, and decide to examine the quarter instead of spending it. That simple decision to look more carefully is where every great coin hunt begins. You do not need to believe every quarter is valuable, and you should not assume every scratch is a mint error. Instead, train your eyes to notice differences. Compare suspicious coins with normal examples from the same year. Look at the placement of the design, the shape of the letters, the date, the mint mark, the edge, and the overall strike. The more normal coins you study, the easier it becomes to recognize something that truly does not belong. There is also something special about a heavily circulated coin that a perfect modern example cannot copy. A worn quarter has traveled. It may have crossed several states, passed through thousands of hands, sat inside cash registers, rolled beneath furniture, or disappeared into an old drawer for years. Every scratch and dark patch tells part of that journey. Most of those marks do not increase its monetary value, but they remind us why an important mint error can remain undiscovered for such a long time. People naturally pay less attention to coins that look worn and dirty. So if you have a black 1984 D Washington quarter, do not get excited simply because of the color, but do not dismiss it simply because it looks ugly either. Check the D mint mark, inspect the date, examine the major lettering, study the eagle, look at the strike, and carefully inspect the edge. If something appears genuinely different from a normal example, research that feature before doing anything to the surface. A few minutes of careful examination can tell you far more than the dirt ever will. And just imagine the feeling if an expert eventually confirmed that the strange feature you noticed was not circulation damage at all, but an extraordinary mint-made error. A coin that had been ignored because of its dark, heavily worn appearance could suddenly become the most interesting quarter in an entire collection. In the most extreme dream scenario, that is where a figure around $185,000 becomes exciting, but only when genuine rarity and professional authentication support the story. That is why the lesson of the 1984 D quarter is simple. Never confuse dirt with rarity, but never let dirt stop you from looking for rarity. Sometimes, the most interesting coin in the jar is not the brightest one. It may be the dark, worn quarter sitting quietly underneath everything else, waiting for somebody with enough curiosity to give it a second look. Now moving on to the next coin, we have the 1998 D Washington quarter in black and dirty condition. It comes from near the end of an important era for this classic quarter design, and the details collectors search for on this coin make the story even more interesting. Now moving on to the next coin, we come to a Washington quarter that many people still remember using in everyday change. It is the 1998 D Washington quarter, and when you find one covered with dark dirt or black tunning, it can be very easy to ignore. After all, 1998 does not sound like an ancient date, and the coin may look far too common to be exciting. But this quarter comes from an interesting moment in American coin history. And if the right unusual mint-made feature appears on the right example, collectors may give it much more attention than its worn appearance suggests. Think back to 1998 for a moment. Millions of Americans were still using cash for everyday purchases, and quarters were constantly moving through stores, parking meters, vending machines, laundromats, and arcade machines. At the same time, the familiar Washington quarter design was approaching the end of an era. The very next year, in 1999, the United States Mint would begin the famous 50-state quarters program. That major change brought new reverse designs into American pockets, but the 1998 quarter still carried the classic eagle reverse that people had known for decades. This makes 1998 an interesting final-year coin for collectors who enjoy the traditional Washington quarter design. The example we are talking about carries a D mint mark, and that little letter is important. The D tells you the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. When beginners first start searching quarters, they sometimes pay attention only to the year, but the mint mark helps identify exactly where a coin was produced. Coins from the same year but different mints can have different production numbers, different known varieties, and different levels of collector interest. So when you find a 1998 quarter, do not stop after reading the date. Look for that small d and make sure you know which coin you are actually examining. Now hold the quarter with George Washington facing you. Washington's portrait dominates the front of the coin, with liberty above his head and "In God We Trust" beside him. The date 1998 appears below, and the D mint mark identifies Denver. Flip the coin over, and you will see the classic American eagle with its wings spread wide. The eagle sits above a bundle of arrows, while olive branches appear below. Around the design are United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. To someone who used these quarters during the 1990s, the design may feel completely ordinary, but that familiar appearance can actually work against a rare era because people are less likely to stop and examine a coin they have seen thousands of times. The 1998 D quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin, not a traditional silver quarter. If you look at the edge of a normal example, you can usually see the copper-colored center between the lighter outer layers. This construction is completely normal. However, after years of circulation, the surface can change dramatically. A quarter may become gray, brown, almost black, or covered with dirt around the letters and design. Sweat from hands, moisture, chemicals, storage conditions, and contact with other materials can all affect the surface over time. This is where our black and dirty 1998 D quarter enters the story. Imagine finding it inside an old jar that has not been opened for years. The coin is so dark that the date is difficult to read at first. Dirt has gathered around Washington's portrait, and the eagle on the back has a dull, almost lifeless appearance. Maybe there are scratches across the fields and small marks around the rim. It does not look beautiful, and it certainly does not look like the kind of coin someone would proudly display under bright lights. Still, before you decide that it is nothing special, there are several areas worth checking. Start by looking at the overall strike. Does everything appear centered where it should be? Does the rim look normal all the way around the coin? Are parts of the design unusually close to the edge on one side and farther away on the other? A genuine off-center strike happens during production when the blank is not positioned correctly between the dies. The farther the design is shifted, while still leaving useful identifying details, the more dramatic the error can become. A genuine example can be interesting to error collectors, but a coin that was damaged after leaving the mint is not the same thing. Next, study the lettering and the date with magnification. This part can become exciting because a strange-looking letter or number can immediately make you wonder whether you have discovered doubling. Look closely at 1998, Liberty, and "In God We Trust." If you see what appears to be a second image beside a letter or number, compare it carefully with normal examples. True double die characteristics come from the die-making process. Machine doubling, heavy wear, dirt, and ordinary damage can also create strange shapes, so a doubled-looking area needs proper identification before you can call it a valuable variety. The D mint mark deserves attention as well, but do not assume every odd-looking D is rare. On a black and dirty quarter, material around the mint mark can change its appearance. A scratch can cut through it, wear can flatten part of it, and dark deposits can make the shape look thicker or thinner than it really is. This is why good lighting is so useful. Move the coin slowly under the light instead of staring at it from only one angle. Sometimes what looks like an extra piece of metal is simply dirt casting a tiny shadow. Now turn the coin over and spend some time with the eagle. The reverse has many design elements that can help you understand how strongly or weakly the coin was struck. Look at the wings, the breast area, the arrows, the olive branches, and the lettering. If something appears missing, weak, or strangely shaped, do not jump to conclusions. A filled die, sometimes called a grease-filled die, can cause parts of a design to appear weak or missing because material interfered with the die during striking. But heavy circulation can also wear away detail, especially on a quarter that has spent years moving through everyday commerce. Another area collectors may investigate is the coin's metal and edge. A normal 1998 D quarter should have the expected clad construction, size, and weight. If a coin seems very unusual in these areas, it may deserve more research. Sometimes people believe they have found a wrong planchet error because the color looks strange, but surface color alone is not enough. Environmental damage can produce very unusual colors. A genuine wrong planchet or other major metal-related error needs much stronger evidence, and professional authentication becomes especially important when the claim could significantly affect the coin's value. There are also striking errors that can look much more dramatic. A coin can sometimes be struck more than once, struck incorrectly, or show other unusual characteristics created during production. Major genuine errors are usually much easier to recognize than tiny random scratches, but identifying exactly what happened can still require expert knowledge. This is where collectors who specialize in mint errors become valuable. They understand how coins are produced, so they can often tell whether a strange feature is physically possible during the minting process or whether it happened after the coin entered circulation. Now there is something important about the condition of this particular quarter. Black dirt does not create rarity. In fact, serious surface problems can work against a coin when collectors evaluate it. If the quarter is heavily circulated, scratched, stained, or environmentally damaged, those problems usually matter. But a major genuine mint error can be a different story because collectors may want the coin for the error itself. Even then, condition still plays a role, but the rarity and visual strength of the error may become the main reason people are interested. This is why you should resist one very strong temptation: cleaning the coin. When people see a dirty quarter, the natural reaction is to make it look better. They may reach for soap, metal polish, baking soda, vinegar, a brush, or another household cleaner. Please do not do that if you think the coin could be collectible. Cleaning can leave tiny scratches, remove original surface material, change the color, and make the coin less attractive to experienced collectors. Even when a cleaned coin looks brighter to you, a grader may see the altered surface immediately. If dirt is hiding an important feature, the safest approach is still not to start scrubbing. Leave the coin as you found it and let an experienced coin dealer or professional grading service advise you. The dark surface may be ugly, but once you remove original material, you cannot put it back. A collector would rather examine an untouched dark coin than wonder what was destroyed by aggressive cleaning. With valuable coins, patience can protect both the evidence and the potential value. Now imagine you have been studying your 1998 D quarter for several minutes. You have compared it with normal pictures, and one feature still does not make sense. Perhaps the strike is dramatically shifted, or there is a clear mint-made feature that appears very different from ordinary damage. At that point, the coin becomes more than something you found in a jar. It becomes a question that needs an answer, and that question is exactly what makes coin collecting so addictive. You may be wondering about the big money possibility. Could a 1998 D quarter ever produce the kind of number that makes collectors stop and stare? A normal dark or dirty 1998 D quarter should never be treated like a huge treasure just because somebody places a giant asking price on one online. But imagine an extreme case where a 1998 D quarter is authenticated with a spectacular nearly unique major mint error, something important enough to attract wealthy error collectors and create strong competition at auction. In that extraordinary dream situation, a headline valuation could theoretically reach around $240,000. Yes, imagine $240,000 connected to a quarter that someone almost spent for 25 cents. But keep the important word in mind, extraordinary. The black color does not create that value, and the D mint mark by itself does not create it either. A number at that level would require a truly exceptional discovery, professional authentication, strong collector demand, and the kind of rarity that separates one coin from the enormous number of ordinary quarters made for circulation. That is also why selling a potentially valuable coin should never begin with guessing. If you find a strange 1998 D quarter, first compare it with reliable examples and learn what kind of feature you may have. If it appears to be a major error or important variety, consider having it examined by a knowledgeable coin dealer. For a coin that could have serious collector value, professional grading and authentication from a respected service, such as PCGS or NGC, can give buyers much more confidence about what they are purchasing. Once the coin has been properly identified, you can think about where to sell it. A common coin may be handled through a local coin shop or collector marketplace, while a genuinely rare and valuable certified error may deserve attention from a major coin auction company. The right selling method depends on what the coin actually is. If you believe you have something important, do not rush into accepting the first offer simply because someone waves cash in front of you. Learn what you own, understand why collectors want it, and look at real completed sales of comparable authenticated coins whenever possible. This is especially important when using online marketplaces. You might see a seller asking thousands, tens of thousands, or even more for an ordinary-looking quarter. An asking price is simply what the seller hopes to receive. It is not proof of market value. Completed auction results are much more useful because they show what real buyers were willing to pay. Coin collecting becomes much safer when you learn to separate exciting advertisements from actual evidence. There is another reason the 1998 D quarter is fun to search. It sits right at the end of the classic eagle reverse era before the state quarters began in 1999. For many collectors, that gives 1998 a little extra historical personality. It represents the closing chapter of a design Americans had carried for decades. The following year, people began searching their change for different states, and suddenly quarters became a national collecting craze. The 1998 D was sitting right on the doorstep of that change. Think about how many of these older quarters may still be hiding today. Some are sitting in coffee cans, desk drawers, old banks, inherited collections, and forgotten boxes. Others may still appear in circulation from time to time. Most will be ordinary, and that is perfectly normal. Coin hunting is not about pretending every quarter is a fortune. It is about knowing that once in a while, an unusual coin can survive because nobody bothered to look closely. The black and dirty appearance can actually make the search more interesting. A shiny coin naturally attracts attention, while a dark coin often gets pushed aside. Imagine a 1998 D quarter sitting unnoticed at the bottom of a container for 15 or 20 years. Several people may have handled it without ever examining the strike. Then you pick it up, place it under a light, and notice something nobody else noticed. Whether the feature turns out to be valuable or not, that moment of discovery is part of the excitement collectors chase. So when you examine a 1998 D Washington quarter, slow down. Check the date and the D mint mark. Then study the lettering and the position of the design. Turn the coin over and inspect the eagle, arrows, olive branches, and rim. Look at the edge without scraping it. If you see possible doubling, a major off-center strike, missing design details, an unusual metal appearance, or another feature that seems mint-made, compare the coin with normal examples before making any decision. And most importantly, leave that dirty surface alone. A valuable error does not need to shine to be valuable. Its story is in how it was made, not in how bright you can make it afterward. Protect the coin, hold it by the edges when possible, keep it somewhere safe, and get another opinion if the unusual feature appears convincing. One careless cleaning session can take only minutes, but the changes it leaves on a coin can last forever. The 1998 D quarter reminds us that valuable discoveries do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they arrive looking dull, dark, and completely ordinary. The real excitement begins when one small detail refuses to match the thousands of normal coins around it. That detail can turn a quick glance into an hour of research, and in the most extraordinary cases, it can turn everyday pocket change into a coin that serious collectors want to compete for. But the next coin is where things get even more interesting, because this one can fool beginners very easily. We are looking at the 1988 D Washington quarter in black, damaged condition, and at first glance, it may look like nothing more than an old quarter that has had a very hard life. The surface may be dark, Washington's portrait may be scratched, the rim may look rough, and parts of the reverse may appear damaged. Most people would spend it without thinking twice, but collectors know there is one important question to ask before giving up on a strange-looking coin. Did that unusual feature happen after the quarter left the mint, or was something already wrong when the coin was struck? That difference can completely change the story. To understand this quarter, we need to travel back to 1988. George H.W. Bush was elected president. That year, American families were renting movies on VHS tapes, and cash was still a huge part of daily life. Quarters moved constantly through stores, parking meters, pay phones, vending machines, laundromats, and arcade machines. The United States needed large numbers of coins for circulation, and the Denver Mint was busy producing Washington quarters. The little D on this coin tells us exactly where it came from, and although that tiny letter may seem unimportant, collectors always pay attention to mint marks because they help identify the exact issue being studied. By 1988, the Washington quarter design was already extremely familiar to Americans. On the front, George Washington's portrait takes up most of the coin. Liberty appears above him, In God We Trust is placed beside the portrait, and the date 1988 appears near the bottom. The D mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. Turn the quarter over and you will see the classic eagle reverse, with the eagle spreading its wings above a bundle of arrows and olive branches. United States of America curves around the upper area, with EPLUBUSUNUM and quarter dollar also appearing on the reverse. It is a design people saw so often that very few stopped to inspect every detail. The coin itself is made with the familiar copper-nickel-clad construction used for regular Washington quarters of this period. It has outer layers containing copper and nickel bonded to a copper center. On a normal example, that copper center can often be noticed as a darker band along the edge. This becomes important when examining a black or damaged coin because strange color alone does not mean the quarter was struck on some mysterious rare metal. Years of environmental exposure can make an ordinary clad quarter look surprisingly unusual. Now imagine finding this 1988 D quarter somewhere unexpected. Maybe it comes from an old toolbox, a garage drawer, or a container of coins that has been sitting untouched for years. When you pick it up, the surface looks almost black. There may be deep scratches across Washington's face, rough areas near the edge, and strange marks across the reverse. Perhaps one section looks flattened, while another appears unusually bright where the surface was scraped. It certainly does not look like a beautiful collector coin, but its rough appearance creates a mystery that needs to be solved before you decide what it is. This is where the story of the 1988 D becomes different from the quarters we have already discussed. With this coin, damage is the biggest question. Collectors make an important distinction between post-mint damage and a genuine mint error. Post-mint damage means something happened to the quarter after it had already been properly produced and released. A coin might be hit by machinery, scraped across concrete, crushed, bent, burned, exposed to chemicals, or damaged by tools. These things can make a quarter look extremely strange, but strange does not automatically mean rare. A genuine mint error is different because the problem happens during the production of the coin. Maybe the blank was positioned incorrectly when it was struck. Maybe something interfered with the dies. Maybe the coin received an unusual strike. These mistakes can create features that collectors recognize as part of the minting process. The challenge is that some forms of later damage can imitate the appearance of a mint error. especially when the person examining the coin has never studied how coins are produced. Suppose your 1988 D quarter has a section near the rim that looks crushed or stretched. A beginner might immediately call it an off-center error, but look carefully before making that decision. A genuine off-center strike normally shows a clear shift in the original design because the blank was not properly centered between the dies. Part of the coin may remain blank, while the struck design appears shifted to one side. Damage caused by pressure or machinery after the coin entered circulation can distort the shape in a completely different way. Understanding that difference is one of the most useful skills a new error collector can develop. Now study the date. The numbers in 1988 are an excellent place to slow down because repeated shapes can sometimes make unusual marks look more dramatic than they really are. If you notice what appears to be doubling around the numbers, use magnification and compare the coin with a normal example. A genuine double die feature is produced through the die-making process and should show characteristics that make sense as part of the original design. A scratch running beside a number, a flattened edge, or movement during the strike can produce a different appearance. Move your attention toward liberty and in God we trust. These letters have edges and small spaces where dirt can collect, especially on a quarter with a dark surface. Thick dirt can create shadows that look like extra lines. Damage can also push metal toward a letter and make it appear wider. Instead of deciding what you have after one quick glance, rotate the coin under a light. A genuine design feature should remain part of the metal as the light changes, while loose dirt and surface deposits may become easier to recognize. The D-mint mark is another place where people often become excited. Because mint marks are important to identifying coins, collectors naturally inspect them closely. On a damaged 1988 D quarter, however, a hit near the D can change its appearance. The metal may be pushed, flattened, or scratched, making the mint mark look doubled or misshapen. That does not mean you should ignore an unusual D, but it does mean you should compare it carefully with correctly identified examples before calling it a rare variety. Flip the coin over and let the light move across the eagle. This side can tell you a lot about the life the quarter has lived. The highest areas of the design may be worn smooth, while protected spaces near the letters may still hold dark material. Look at the eagle's wings, the arrows, the olive branches, and the rim, if part of the design seems unusually weak. There are several possible explanations. Heavy wear can remove details, damage can flatten them, and in some cases, a problem during striking can produce genuine weakness. One possible mint-related feature collectors investigate is a struck-through error. This can happen when foreign material gets between the die and the coin during the strike, leaving an unusual impression or affecting part of the design. Another possibility involves a die that becomes filled with grease or debris, which can cause certain design elements to appear weak or incomplete. These features need careful study because normal wear and damage can sometimes produce a similar first impression. The more dramatic the claim, the more important professional authentication becomes. A major double strike or dramatic off-center strike would tell a very different story. Errors like these can be visually impressive because something clearly went wrong while the coin was being produced. Error collectors often enjoy coins where the mistake can be seen without needing to imagine it. However, if the quarter is simply crushed, cut, drilled, bent, burned, or scraped, that is ordinary damage rather than a minting error. No matter how strange the damage looks, rarity depends on what actually caused it. This is also why you should examine the edge. Hold the quarter carefully and look around its entire circumference. A damaged coin may have flattened areas, cuts, dents, or places where metal has been pushed out of shape. If the coin seems unusually thin, thick, light, heavy, or different in metal appearance, do not alter it to investigate. A serious wrong planchet or other metal-related error would need proper measurements and expert examination. Cutting into the edge or scraping away the surface could destroy exactly the evidence needed to identify the coin. Now we need to talk about that black appearance. A black quarter can certainly catch your attention, but black color alone is not a mint error. A coin can darken because of moisture, chemicals, heat, soil, environmental exposure, or years of poor storage. Some quarters have spent time outdoors or in places where the metal reacted with surrounding materials. Others may have been exposed to substances that permanently changed the surface. These changes can make the coin interesting to look at, but they do not automatically make it valuable. And this is the point where many people make their biggest mistake. They decide the coin looks too dirty to study, so they clean it. They may use vinegar, baking soda, toothpaste, metal polish, brushes, or other household products. Please resist that temptation. If you think a coin might contain a real mint error, leave the surface alone. Cleaning can create scratches, remove original material, change the color, and make professional examination more difficult. A collector can evaluate a dirty coin, but nobody can restore original metal that has already been scrubbed away. Even if your quarter looks terrible, hold it by the edges when possible and place it somewhere safe. If you believe there is loose dirt covering an important feature, do not start experimenting with chemicals. Let an experienced coin professional examine the coin first. With collectible coins, making them look shiny is not the goal. Preserving the original surface and understanding what happened to the coin are far more important. Now imagine that your damaged-looking 1988 D quarter has one feature that refuses to fit the normal explanation. You compare it with other 1988 D quarters, and the difference is obvious. You show it to an experienced collector, and instead of saying the coin was simply crushed or scratched, they tell you the feature appears to have happened during production. Suddenly, that ugly quarter becomes much more interesting. What looked like damage could actually be evidence of a genuine mint mistake. This is where collector interest can grow quickly. Error collectors often search for coins that tell a clear story about something going wrong during production. A dramatic error can be more exciting than a tiny variety because people can see the mistake immediately. The stronger and rarer the error, the more attention it may receive, especially if professional authentication confirms exactly what happened. Rarity, visual appeal, error type, condition, and demand all work together when serious collectors decide how much they are willing to pay. So how high could the excitement go with a 1988 D quarter? A normal black and damaged example should not be treated as a major treasure simply because it looks strange. But imagine an extreme situation where a coin that appeared damaged was actually confirmed to have a spectacular, nearly unique minting error. If it were important enough to attract advanced collectors and create serious competition, a dream-level valuation could theoretically rise toward an incredible $325,000. Just think about that for a moment. $325,000 connected to a quarter that somebody might have thrown into a junk drawer. That is not a normal value for a 1988 D quarter, and ordinary damage will not produce anything close to that kind of result. A figure at that level would require an extraordinary authenticated error, extreme rarity, and powerful collector demand. The reason to inspect your coin is not because every damaged quarter is valuable, but because a true mint error can sometimes be mistaken for damage by someone who does not know what to look for. If you believe you have discovered something important, your next step should be research rather than rushing to sell it. Compare your coin with normal 1988 D quarters and with authenticated examples of the error you think you see. A knowledgeable coin dealer can provide another opinion, and professional grading services such as PCGS or NGC can become important when a coin appears valuable enough to justify authentication. A professional opinion can also help separate genuine mint-made characteristics from the countless forms of damaged coins receive after leaving the mint. Once the coin is properly identified, selling it becomes much easier. If it turns out to be a common damaged quarter, you have your answer. If it turns out to be a significant certified mint error, then you can consider specialist collectors, established coin dealers, or respected auction companies that handle unusual United States coins. For an important piece, a strong auction can place the coin in front of several interested collectors at the same time, which can be very different from accepting the first private offer you receive. Be careful with online prices as well. A seller can ask almost any amount for a coin, so a giant listing price does not prove that buyers will pay it. When researching value, completed sales of properly identified and authenticated coins are much more useful. You want to compare your quarter with something genuinely similar, not with an ordinary coin carrying an unrealistic price tag. Good research protects you from disappointment, but it also helps you recognize when a truly unusual discovery deserves serious attention. There is something emotional about a coin like this because its appearance works against it. A beautiful, shining coin naturally makes people stop and look. A black, scratched, damaged-looking quarter does the opposite. It almost asks to be ignored. Someone may throw it into a cup, leave it in a garage, or spend it without ever checking the details. That is exactly why learning the difference between damage and a real mint error can be so useful. Picture yourself sorting through an old family coin jar late one evening. You have already checked dozens of ordinary quarters, and your eyes are getting tired. Then this dark 1988D appears. It looks rough enough that you almost push it aside, but one strange area catches the light. You look again, compare it with another quarter, and realize the feature is not where you expected it to be. That tiny moment of curiosity is what keeps collectors searching, because you never know which coin will give you a reason to stop. The lesson from this 1988D quarter is not that damage creates value. In most cases, damage does exactly the opposite. The lesson is that you should learn what genuine mint errors look like before deciding why a coin appears strange. Check the date, study the D-mint mark, inspect the lettering, examine the strike, turn the coin over, look carefully at the eagle and check the edge. Most importantly, do not clean away the evidence before someone knowledgeable has a chance to see it. The roughest-looking coin in your collection may turn out to be ordinary, and that is part of coin hunting. But once in a great while, a strange-looking feature can have a much more interesting explanation. That possibility is why collectors keep their magnifying glasses nearby, and why an old quarter can hold your attention much longer than 25 cents normally should. And now we have reached the final coin, the oldest quarter on our list, and perhaps the easiest one to misunderstand. This is the 1966 Washington quarter with no mint mark, found in circulated black condition. At first, it may look like nothing more than an old, dark quarter that has spent 60 years moving through pockets, drawers, cash registers, and forgotten coin jars. But 1966 comes from a very unusual period in United States coin history. And the missing mint mark is not necessarily a mistake. Once you understand what was happening at the mint during those years, this ordinary-looking quarter becomes much more interesting. To understand the 1966 quarter, we have to go back to the middle of the 1960s when the United States was dealing with a serious coin shortage. Silver prices had risen, people were pulling silver coins from circulation, and the government was making major changes to American coinage. The Coinage Act of 1965 changed the composition of several denominations, including the quarter. The older Washington quarters had contained silver, but the regular quarters produced for circulation, beginning with the 1965 issue, changed to a copper-nickel-clad composition. That makes 1966 part of an important turning point, when the quarter in people's pockets was changing in a major way. There was another unusual decision during this period. Mint marks were temporarily removed from circulating United States coins. The government wanted to reduce collecting pressure during the coin shortage, so quarters dated 1965, 1966, and 1967 do not carry the normal mint marks collectors might expect. This means that if you find a regular 1966 Washington quarter without a mint mark, you have not automatically discovered a missing mint mark error. That is how these quarters were intended to appear. This detail is extremely important because many beginners see no letter on the coin and immediately believe something went wrong at the mint. So when you hold a 1966 quarter and search for a D, S, or another mint mark, do not be surprised when you cannot find one. The absence of a mint mark is part of the history of this issue. In fact, knowing that can save you from one of the most common mistakes made when older quarters are offered for sale online. A seller may describe the missing mint mark as rare or unusual, but on a normal 1966 quarter, the lack of a mint mark is expected. The real treasure hunt begins when you look beyond that feature. and start searching for something that genuinely separates your coin from ordinary examples. Now take a closer look at the design. On the front, George Washington faces left in the familiar portrait that had already appeared on the quarter for decades. Liberty curves above his head, In God We Trust appears beside the portrait, and the date 1966 sits below Washington. The design is simple and familiar, which makes small unusual details easier to miss when the coin is heavily circulated. If your example has a dark or almost black surface, you may need strong lighting just to see some of the finer details clearly. Turn the quarter over, and the classic American eagle fills the reverse. Its wings are spread wide, with arrows below and olive branches underneath. United States of America appears around the upper portion, EPLUBUSUNUM is placed above the eagle, and quarter dollar appears along the lower edge. This is the classic eagle reverse that remained familiar to Americans long before the state quarters changed what people expected to see on the back of a quarter. The metal inside this coin is also an important part of its story. A regular 1966 Washington quarter is made from copper-nickel-clad material with a copper center, rather than the traditional silver composition used for regular quarters dated 1964 and earlier. Look carefully at the edge of a normal 1966 quarter, and you can often see the copper-colored center. That small line around the edge is a reminder of the huge change American coinage had just experienced. Now imagine finding this quarter in circulated black condition. Perhaps it comes from an old box of coins that belonged to a parent or grandparent. The quarter has been sitting there for decades, mixed with old pennies, nickels, and dimes. When you pick it up, the surface is so dark that Washington's portrait almost disappears under the tunning. The eagle looks dull, the fields are covered with marks, and the highest points of the design have been worn smooth. It looks old, and because of the dark color, it may even look much older than it really is. This is the moment when many people become excited for the wrong reason. They see the dark surface and think it must be rare silver. Then they notice there is no mint mark, and the excitement grows even more. But neither of those things alone proves you have an expensive coin. Dark color can come from environmental exposure, storage conditions, chemicals, moisture, or decades of handling. And as we just learned, no mint mark is normal for a 1966 quarter. The secret is to look for something more meaningful. Start with the date. Make sure the numbers are clear enough to identify the coin correctly, then study them under magnification. Look for unusual doubling or other features that appear to be part of the original design rather than scratches sitting on top of it. The difference matters because circulation can create all kinds of strange marks. A coin that has traveled for decades may have been dropped, scraped, crushed, or hit against countless other objects. Those marks tell us about the coin's life, but they are not the same as errors created during production. Next, examine Liberty and In God We Trust. Move the quarter slowly beneath a light and watch how the surface changes. On a heavily toned coin, shadows can make letters look doubled or distorted. Dirt can fill small spaces and make parts of the design appear thicker. If you notice something unusual, compare it with a normal 1966 quarter before deciding what you have. Good collectors do not rely on excitement alone. They look for evidence that can survive careful comparison. Then turn your attention to the strike. Is the design centered properly? Does the rim appear even around the entire coin, or is the design noticeably shifted toward one side? A genuine off-center strike can happen when the blank is not correctly positioned during the striking process. Dramatic examples can attract error collectors because the mistake is easy to see and tells a clear story about what went wrong during production. But an old quarter that was bent, crushed, or distorted after leaving the mint is not an off-center error. Another possibility worth understanding is a struck-through error. During coin production, foreign material can sometimes come between the die and the blank when the coin is struck. Depending on what happened, this can leave an unusual area in the finished design. There are also situations where grease or debris fills part of a die and causes certain details to appear weak or missing. These features can be collectible when genuine, but heavy circulation can also remove detail, so a weak-looking letter on a 60-year-old quarter needs careful study. Collectors may also look for genuine double die characteristics. This is another area where beginners need patience because not every doubled-looking image is a double die, where damage, lighting, and other forms of doubling can create confusing appearances. If you see clear separation in parts of the lettering or date, research the exact characteristics rather than giving the coin a rare label immediately. A real variety should match recognized diagnostic features, or it should be examined by someone qualified to determine whether you have discovered something unusual. Now here is where this 1966 quarter becomes especially fascinating, because it comes from the period immediately after the change away from regular silver quarters. People naturally pay close attention to unusual metal characteristics. If your quarter does not look or feel like a normal copper-nickel-clad example, do not start cutting into it or scraping the edge. The correct approach is careful measurement and professional examination. A truly unusual composition or wrong planchet error would need to be authenticated before serious collectors would treat it as something important. You can begin by looking at the edge without changing it. A normal clad quarter usually shows evidence of its layered construction. If your coin appears different, that gives you a reason to investigate, not a reason to immediately declare it rare. Color can be misleading, especially on a black or environmentally affected coin. Weight can provide useful information, but even then, a proper scale and comparison with known specifications are needed. For a potentially important discovery, professional testing is much safer than any home experiment that could damage the coin. And please do not clean this quarter just because the black surface bothers you. This is especially important with an older coin. People often believe cleaning will reveal hidden details and increase value, but aggressive cleaning can do exactly the opposite. Toothpaste, baking soda, vinegar, metal polish, brushes, and harsh chemicals can permanently alter the surface. Tiny scratches may become visible under magnification, and original tunning or surface characteristics can be removed forever. If you believe dirt is covering something important, the safest choice is to leave the coin alone until an experienced collector or dealer can examine it. Hold it by the edges when possible and store it in a proper coin holder. A dark original surface is usually easier for an expert to understand than a bright surface that has been scrubbed. Remember, collectors are interested in originality. They do not need a 60-year-old quarter to look like it was made yesterday. Condition is another part of the story. A circulated 1966 quarter has spent time being used as money, so wear is expected. Washington's hair and face may have lost detail, and the eagle's feathers may appear smooth. An uncirculated example is different because it may retain much more of its original surface and mint luster. But for the black circulated coin we are discussing, condition alone is not where a huge value would come from. The real big money possibility would require a genuinely extraordinary characteristic that changes what the coin actually represents. Imagine now that you are sitting at a table with this dark quarter in your hand. You already know the missing mint mark is normal, so you do not get distracted by that. Instead, you compare the coin with another 1966 quarter. You look at the date, then the edge, then the reverse. Something does not match. You check again, and the difference is still there. Maybe the strike has a dramatic feature, or perhaps the physical characteristics suggest something far more unusual than ordinary circulation wear. At that moment, the smartest thing you can do is stop guessing. Photograph the coin clearly from both sides and record anything unusual you have noticed. Then compare those details with trusted references and authenticated examples. If the evidence still looks promising, a knowledgeable coin dealer can provide an opinion, and professional authentication from a respected grading service such as PCGS or NGC may be worth considering. For an extraordinary error, authentication can become one of the most important parts of the entire selling process. And now we reach the number everyone has been waiting for. Because this is our final coin, imagine the strongest possible discovery. A 1966 Washington quarter that looks dark and ordinary on the outside, but turns out to contain an extraordinary, nearly unique, professionally authenticated minting error connected to this historic change in American coin production. If a discovery were important enough to attract major collectors and create intense competition, an extreme dream-level valuation could theoretically climb toward an astonishing $475,000. Yes, $475,000 for the most extraordinary hypothetical example. But this point must be clear. A normal circulated 1966 quarter without a mint mark is not worth that amount simply because it is old, black, or missing a mint mark. No mint mark is expected on this issue. A number anywhere near that level would require an exceptional authenticated error or discovery with extreme rarity and serious collector demand. The exciting part is learning how to recognize when a coin deserves that deeper level of investigation. If you think your coin may be important, do not rush to sell it to the first person who makes an offer. First, understand what you have. If necessary, have the coin professionally authenticated and graded. Once the coin has a clear identification, research completed sales of comparable pieces rather than relying on random online asking prices. A seller can type almost any number into an advertisement, but a completed auction tells you what real collectors were actually willing to pay. For a genuinely important error, you may want to speak with established coin dealers or auction companies that understand rare United States coins. A major auction can expose an exceptional piece to multiple collectors, and competition between buyers is often what creates the strongest result. Keep good photographs, grading information, and any professional documentation together. When serious money is involved, buyers want confidence that the coin has been correctly identified. There is something special about the 1966 quarter because it carries so much history in such a small object. It comes from a time when American coinage was changing, silver was disappearing from regular quarters, the government was fighting a coin shortage. And mint marks had temporarily vanished from circulating coins. Millions of people used these quarters without thinking about any of that history. They simply saw 25 cents. Now, decades later, you may see something completely different. You see a coin from a turning point in American money. You understand why the mint mark is missing. You know why the edge matters. You know that black color does not automatically mean silver, and you know that a strange mark must be separated from ordinary damage before it can be called an error. That knowledge gives you an advantage over someone who simply looks at the date and throws the quarter back into the jar. Maybe your 1966 quarter came from an old dresser drawer. Maybe it was part of a family collection that nobody examined carefully. Perhaps it has been sitting inside a container since the 1970s or 1980s. You cannot know everywhere it has traveled, but you can decide what happens next. Instead of cleaning it, spending it, or believing an unrealistic online listing, you can examine it carefully and let the evidence tell the story. That is the real excitement of searching coins. Most of the pieces you examine will not become life-changing treasures, but every coin gives you another chance to learn what normal looks like. Then, when something truly unusual appears, you are much more likely to notice it. A tiny difference in the strike, metal, design, or production process can be the clue that turns an ordinary evening of sorting change into a discovery you will never forget. So take one final look at that circulated black 1966 Washington quarter. Study Washington's portrait, read the date, remember why there is no mint mark, inspect the eagle and examine the edge. Do not let the dark surface fool you, and do not let excitement fool you either. Search carefully, compare patiently, protect the coin, and get professional help when the evidence points toward something truly unusual. Because sometimes the greatest treasure does not arrive in a perfect holder with a price already attached. Sometimes it is dark, worn, overlooked, and sitting quietly at the bottom of an old coin jar, waiting for the right person to understand what they are looking at.